rare read in the textbook, not until now, maybe for another 10 years, is that we actually listen to ourselves while we're speaking. Okay, and this is not trivial. So today, I'm going to focus on this last aspect of the auditory system, that how does the auditory system process speech, our own speech. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today. Now, if you look at the hearing and audition that involves the difference between vision. Vision, most of things is passive, as we say that when we see something, it's what we see is a reflection of light on an object that our retina perceives. But our eye, unlike some cameras, our eye does not beam light lighting up, so it's more a receiver. But in auditory system, we involve both listening and the talking. So here's the summary. I'll tell you what are the tasks auditory system has to accomplish. Okay, so if you think about what you would do with your hearing, and here are the three major questions that your auditory system face every day. One, where the sound comes from. That's the first thing your auditory system reacts to. Front, back, up, down, so forth, so on. Secondly, what does this mean? Thirdly, very important, and who is talking? And now this may be seeming to be trivial, that is saying, well, who is talking? You're sitting there, I'm talking. But there are a lot of people actually have hallucination, and you're too young to have this. At some point in your life, you begin to hear sound in your mind. That's confusing, whether you make it or someone make it or internal make it. So that's something that's worth to pay attention to. Now, if you look at the brain areas where these questions are involved, there are mainly auditory cortex, which we talk about, and frontal cortex, which we didn't spend much time. Okay, so when we listen to a sound come from the ear, which we learned from my previous lectures, through brainstem, thalamus, primary auditory cortex, this is the listening path. So once we hear something, and quite often we memorize this, like a speech we learn, and then the memorization takes place somewhere here and somewhere here. So when you're listening to something, you form a memory, and memory perhaps is formed to the prefrontal cortex. Okay, and then later on it can be used to guide the motor cortex production sound. That's one pathway. So secondly, when you listen to something that is you're familiar, for example, your native language, so before somebody finishes, you already know what he or she is saying. That is what I call retrieval. That is probably the process going from this way. Okay. Now the blue line here, and I shows here, is another part of our hearing. That is production, vocalization. So when we vocalize something, we initiate a command that goes to motor cortex and goes to laryngeal muscle, then you vocalize. At the same time, there's evidence now that command also goes back to auditory cortex to tell us what we're going to say. So I'll give you some example of this in the lecture. Now let's go back to the very fundamental elements of our talking. So how do we talk? So today's lecture will focus on vocal production and what that do to our hearing. How do we make sound? Here's an anatomy of our vocal production system. So here is the most important organ called a vocal fold. And there's a bump here. If you're a male, there's a bump is more clear. If you're not female, it's not so clear. But if you push your finger here, every time you talk, you feel vibration right in that spot. That's exactly what you put your finger here, right here. That's vibration. That's a vocal fold. It's a small, thin piece of a membrane with a little opening in the middle. Okay. Now, when we decide we want to vocalize, we the diaphragm in your lung. We push air through. So air goes through here, and when you pass through here, since it's a membrane is mostly closed with a little gap in here, when air goes through here, they vibrate. That's where you feel when you say there's a clear vibration. But if you whisper, say hello today, right? There's not much vibration. So that vibration is the vibration of a vocal fold. Okay, and that determines in next slides I'll show you the pitch we make, whether you're a male and a female. all from this vibration. And then once the air passes through here and then enter this what we call upper laryngeal cavity, that is all the space our mouth, inside our mouth will form. Now, depends where we put our tongue and where we put our lips, we make different formation that serve as essentially acoustic resonator. So another way you can model as a filter. We can modulate what we produce by shaping our mouth, our tongue in a different way. So we can say ah, ga, da, pa is all here. Okay. So this whole process gave rise of a speech we produce that someone else can hear. And these are anatomical terms for this that, as I said earlier in my lecture, that I don't, you don't have to memorize this, but vocal fold is apparatus that you really should know. So here I show you again the diagram for this. The air is generated from diaphragm and go through here. This vocal fold, this whole apparatus here called the larynx, and that goes through here. Now, the air passes through here is like a pulse train, so we call it glattal pulse that pass through here, and here's the filter we talk about. So if we go through this structure, here's what's like. So the air that goes through here we call glattal pulses, and their spectrum is like this. Okay, this glattal pulses, let me correct this. So glattal pulses refer to the signal passing through so because vocal fold there is no vibration. Air you push through is really continuous. It is a vibration over here that makes it into pulses, and that is what I call glattal pulses. And that, if you take the spectrum of that, it's periodic. It has an exponential decay because of the mechanical property of this. Now, this is one case where F0, the vibration frequency, fundamental frequency of a vocal fold vibration is 100 hertz. This is similar to a low, adult male voice. Male or juvenile young adults, that voice vibration frequency might be higher, for example, 200 hertz. Then the glattal pulse spectrum will be look like this. The difference is here, this fundamental frequency now changes from 100 hertz to 200 hertz, so does the gaps between each component. So they are all harmonic. So this is fundamental frequency, 200 hertz, 400, 600, basically twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, so far, so on. Okay, so all harmonic in here. That's the first signal. Then this signal goes through our vocal tract, and that is a vocal tract here, and the upper laryngeal surface cavity. That is served as a function. Okay, vocal tract just anywhere above the vocal fold. So it's like this. Now, in your signal processing course, if you ever ask a question, if you have this is a filter, this is filter, when this connected together, that's a cascade. It's a serial connection. Then what is the outcome of this? Well, from the signal processing, we'll tell you the outcome of this filter is equivalent to the multiplication of this on top of that. Okay, if you multiply this on this, this is what you got. This is what is coming out of your mouth now. We call it speech, and the base over here is this glattal pulse spectrum, and it's modulated by these filters. So that's where you have 3 peaks. Now, for the similar situation, but a different speaker with higher modulation and fundamental frequency, you got a spectrum like this. The symbol vowel, you see the same outline here. That's defined by this, but it's a higher modulation, higher frequency. So this would be equivalent to a same vowel produced by male or by female. Okay, that's very well understood. In fact, the computer who generated speech now all use this model. They produce one glottal pulse, two a spectral envelope for what particular vowel or speech. That's it. Listen to the computer produce sounds. Today is Friday by a computer. That's not exactly this way. So this is well understood. Then there are two things here that you pay attention to. One of them is this fundamental frequency. We also call it pitch. I've seen many times by now. That is a very important property of speech. Second is this envelope we call it format that refer to the three peaks here. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. There's two properties, parameters of a speech sound. Okay. Now, if you look different vowels in a speech, R, E, U, you can see here the vocal tract filtering essentially give rise to envelope. Okay, and the vibration of the vocal fold gave rise to the fundamental frequency or pitch. Okay. Now, if we plot one of those in a greater detail, is shown here. Now, in this case now, I plot this in logarithmic scale. But remember, this is F fundamental frequency, twice, 3 times, 4 times. The difference, important thing is, the difference between these, same, equal to fundamental frequency. It's very important. I said it earlier, whenever you pick up, no problem, telling is male and female. But in all the phone line transmission, all the here are filtered out to save bandwidth. You are able to tell male and female by identifying pitch, by computing pitch, the redundancy information. Okay, so for speech sound, spectrum like this. This is a pitch, and each peak here, F1 through F2 through F3, we call formats. Formats come from filter shape of a vocal tract. Okay. Now, equivalent to this is the waveform and the time domain. That you have these periodic signals. The major period here is equivalent to 1 over pitch that we went through. Now, how is this sound represented by auditory system? We discussed earlier in my lectures, but just briefly, just give a review. If you play a voice, in this case, it's the E, spectrum of this, in this case, to experimental cats, and then you record from auditory nerve, many of them, and you construct the profile of many auditory nerves according to their frequency sensitivity and the response to the same vowel. Then you have this profile that is mimic this. So we can see voice like is reflected by population response in the auditory nerve fibers. And this is a classic work done by 2 researchers, 2 professors in our department, Murray Sachs and Eric Young. Unfortunately, Murray just passed away earlier this year, and in the, I think in February. This is work they did in the 70s that laid the foundation for sound. It could be interpreted by the auditory system. And there's evidence indicate the human auditory nerve are pretty much similar to other mammals. The difference begins much higher. That's a format, the format. What about the pitch? And we said these are format and pitch are 2 most important. We talked about earlier in the lecture that now we know in human brain there's a part of the cortex next to the primary auditory cortex that encodes the pitch. That pitch is extracted here. We also talk about actually, this was found in my laboratory more than 10 years ago, that in marmoset monkeys, we also find an area in the brain that encodes pitch. So both in humans and non-human primates, now there's evidence. This work was done by graduate students in my lab many years ago, who actually he was a TA for this class. Now he's a professor himself in University College. Now, how about the other things of speech that we have not talked about? Of speech, a property. Perception. So if you take 2 sound called, one is da, one is ta. Okay, these 2 sounds you can hear very clear. Da, ta, da, ta. is a little bit of gap here called voice unset time. So now